What is up, bros and broettes? I'm Inkslasher, and today is a big day. Today, we are going to be doing the most requested episode of Versus to date. Yes, on the last Versus video I made, so many people asked me to make this video. It was absolutely insane. Today, we're going to be looking at the Rift E9, the new burst action energy pistol versus the old shotgun pistol that came out in supply drops a while ago, the Marshals. Now, to preface this video, we are not going to be looking at the Marshals while they are dual weld, and here's why. The Marshals dual weld are a much better weapon than the Rift E9, mainly because you have two of them. It doubles your rate of fire, it doubles your damage, it doubles all these things, and the Rift, you simply cannot dual wield. You can't use it akimbo, so there's no sense in comparing the two in that way. So today, it's going to be one singular Marshal versus one singular Rift, and we're going to see which one is better. So I feel like to fully understand this comparison, you actually have to understand why the Marshals are so overpowered when they're akimboed. So let me briefly explain that. There's two reasons why. So first of all, the developers actually tried to make it so this wasn't the case by first of all decreasing the amount of pellets when akimboed and the amount of pellet damage and decreasing the fire rate. So, when looking at this, you need to know that decreasing the amount of pellets doesn't do enough for this. Why? Because the Marshal's claim to fame is the base damage. You only need to land one pellet, and the amount of damage you're doing is 98 up close, 84 at mid-range, and 50 at long-range, which means when akimboed, as long as you hit one pellet out of one gun and one pellet out of the other gun, you're instantly doing at least 100 damage, which makes decreasing the amount of pellets completely useless. Also, decreasing the fire rate, it needs to be done, but it's not enough, because when you're using two of these, it's already doubling the fire rate, because you can fire one of them, and then fire the other Marshal, and while the first one's reloading, you're able to fire that second one, and then while the second one's reloading, you're able to fire that first one, and that in sense, doubles the fire rate, which is pretty much better than rapid fire on most of the weapons in this game. So, now that you understand that, let's get into comparing the Rift E9 and the Marshal 16 singularly. Is singularly even like a word? I may have just made that up. I meant like non-akimboed, but I figure you understood. Anyway, back to the point, let's look at these two weapons. We'll start off with the damage like always. So, the Rift E9 super simple. Per shot, energy, bullet, whatever you want to call it, it deals 51 damage. Now, this is a 2-round burst weapon, which means if you hit both projectiles, you will be dealing 102 damage, always getting a 1-burst kill, unless you're using kinetic armor or have the uplink ball. Other than that, always going to be a 1-round burst, assuming you hit both shots. However, the Marshal 16 takes it up a step and deals even more damage. It deals 98 at close range, 84 at mid-range, and 50 at long-range. Now, we're going to talk about those ranges in a second. They're not the best ranges, but the damage they put out is awesome. And on top of that, it has 16 pellets, hence why it's called the Marshal 16. At least, I'm assuming that's why it's called the Marshal 16. And then each of these pellets is dealing 2 damage. So the smallest amount of damage you're going to do at a long range with the Marshal 16 is 52 damage, because 50 damage plus 2 damage per that 1 pellet you hit. Therefore, 52 damage is the lowest amount of damage, which is larger than 51, the lowest amount of damage for the Rift E9. Therefore, the Marshal 16 gets plus 1 point and takes the lead. So the range is where the Rift E9 really makes up for this, because the Rift deals the same amount of damage no matter where you are on a map. You can be standing right beside your enemy or literally across the map, the complete opposite sides of the map. You are still going to be dealing that 51 damage per shot. Whereas the Marshals, the maximum amount of range you can even get a hit marker is 15 meters, which seems incredibly short. However, you got to remember, it is a shotgun. It is dealing a ton of damage. So because of that, the range is obviously much better on the Rift. Therefore, it gets plus 1 point and ties it up. So the way the Marshal works is you actually start with 2 bullets in a magazine, and then every time you pull that trigger, it fires both bullets. However, both bullets act as more like 1 bullet. However, every time you pull that trigger, you have to reload, which means it gives it a super slow fire rate at 22 RPM. Now, if we look at the Rift has a much better fire rate, but it has burst delay. But even if we take that burst delay into account, it's still going to fire at 186 RPM with the burst delay accounted for. So even with that burst delay, it has a much better fire rate than the Marshals, therefore gets plus 1 point and takes the lead. So like I said, technically there is 2 bullets in a magazine for the Marshal 16. However, like I said, it acts as 1. However, in a magazine for the Rift E9, there is 12 shots. But like I said, it's a 2-round burst weapon, so you're going to get 6 trigger pulls out of a Rift E9, which is obviously much better than the Marshal's 1 trigger pull. So for that, it has a larger magazine size, therefore getting plus 1 more point. For most weapons in Black Ops 3, there's 2 reload times, one when the magazine still has bullets in it and one when it's empty. However, since every time you pull the trigger for the Marshal, it's always going to be the same reload time. That reload time is 2.5 seconds. The Rift E9, when there is bullets still in the magazine, is 2.45 seconds, so almost the exact same as the Marshal's. But when the magazine is empty, it's 2.95 seconds, which is longer than the Marshal's. But because of this, most of the time you're going to be reloading with bullets still in your magazine. However, I don't want to give any points out on that because the times are so close, and in fact, it can be worse if your magazine's empty. So I'm just not going to give out any points for that stat, and we'll leave it the way it is. So since these are secondary weapons, there's a stat we got to talk about that we don't normally talk about, and that is the amount of time it takes to pull out. And what this means is that, let's say you're using a sniper and someone's running at you with an SMG. It's the amount of time it takes to switch over to that secondary weapon when using that primary weapon. So with the Marshals, it takes 0.25 seconds to pull out the Marshals. With the Rift E9, it takes 0.3 seconds out. And I know that seems like a small number, but literally that can be the difference between life or death in those situations. So for that, the pullout game is just a little bit stronger for the Marshals and gets plus 1 point for that. However, I will say this, if you're using the Marshal's dual weld, it actually takes double the time to pull them out. It takes 0.5 seconds, so that pullout game gets a little bit worse when you're using the Marshal's akimbo. However, like I said, we're talking about a singular Marshal, and it's faster than the Rift. So like I said, it gets plus 1 point. Next up, aim down sights time. The aim down sights time for the Rift E9 is 0.125 seconds, and for the Marshals is just 0.1 second. So obviously, again, that is better for the Marshals. It gets plus 1 point and ties it up. So next up, we're going to look at hip spread here. And the one thing I got to mention is that if you're using the Rift E9 and firing from the hip, just don't, because what happens is that projectile that you're shooting out of the Rift E9 can actually fire in any direction when you're firing from the hip. You don't really get any control over where it's going. It can go up, it can go down. So in other words, just try not to fire from the hip with the Rift E9. However, the hip spread for the Rift E9 is 3 inches at a minimum and 6 inches at a maximum, whereas the Marshal's is 3 inches at a minimum and 5 at a maximum. And actually, it's the same with the akimboed Marshal's, which is pretty damn good that it doesn't get any worse. However, it is better for the Marshal's. It's 1 inch better at the maximum size, so therefore, it gets plus 1 point for that. So if simply hip spread isn't enough for you to give the win to the Marshal's, here is a really big reason why the Marshal actually gets the win for this week. So the difference is the Rift E9 is a projectile fire weapon. The Marshal's is a hit scan firing weapon. What this means is as soon as you pull that trigger with the Marshal, you're going to get a hit marker. The bullets are going to fly to that person with no time delay whatsoever. However, with a projectile weapon, it takes time for that energy blast to actually get to your target. Not to mention, you have to hit 2 of these energy blasts. What this means is that if you are firing at someone whatsoever with the Rift, and they have at all good lateral movement, if they're moving to the side whatsoever, or moving quickly even, it's going to be extremely hard to hit both bursts out of this weapon, especially because the bursts for a burst fire weapon are actually firing pretty slow. What this means is because it's a projectile firing weapon, it's super hard to get shots on target, and subsequent shots on target are the way to get kills with this weapon. So because of that, the fact that it's not a hit scan weapon, that it's a projectile firing weapon, I'm going to have to give another point to the Marshal, and like I said, it gets the win this week for 2 main reasons. Super high base damage weapon, and it's a hit scan, whereas the Rift E9 is a projectile fire weapon, and is actually pretty damn hard to use. However, when you do use it properly, it ends up being a pretty damn good weapon. But let me know if I got it right. What do you think? What do you think is the winning weapon? Let me know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, it would be super greatly appreciated, especially if you made it this far, if you could leave a like rating. We've been been on a roll getting our videos over 1,000 likes, so let's see if we could keep that up. That would be fantastic. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. I upload new Call of Duty videos every single day of the week, and if that sounds like something you'd enjoy, that red subscribe button is sitting down below with your name on it. So thank you all so much for coming out and watching. Check me out on Twitch and Twitter. Those links are down in the description. And until next time, guys, peace out.